Welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Personnel Study Task Force. As you probably know, that this task force was established as a result of a town meeting vote in June of 2021, the last town meeting we had. And the charge is that you've all received. But I wanted to start by saying thank you all for volunteering. This is a task force, so it shouldn't occupy your entire life. And it will be until the job is done. Initially, it had been asked that the task force have something ready for town meeting 2022, but given that that's to occur on May 1st, so backing up, that's not a lot of time. So we put in the charge 2023. However, if it's finished before that, that's fine. My name is Susan Bates. I'm the select board liaison, and I'll be starting the meeting out. And once we get to the electing the chair and the clerk, I'm gonna recede a little bit and observe and be available for questions, but the five of you can continue. So let's start with introductions. Paul, how about you?
Okay, Paul McConnell. I live at 33 Grove Street here in historic Concord. And just my background is I had 3.5 years as a teacher, and then I decided to do something a little less life-threatening, and I joined the police department. And I was there for 30 years, plus or minus, retiring in 2015.
Great,
That's
thanks.
me.
Ruth.
Ruth Lauer here in Concord and in the Mill Dam. Have been a resident since '83, I guess. Served as an elected official and an employee of the town of Concord. Have greatly enjoyed living in Concord.
So Ruth is our representative of a former select board representative. And then we have Claude, who's a former personnel board representative. Go ahead, Claude.
Thanks. Hi, Claude Cicchetti. Live on Old Road to 9 Acre Corner, been in Concord since 1997. I was on the finance committee for 6 years and the personnel board, I think for 6 years as well. I teach, I'm on full-time faculty at Bentley University teaching finance.
Great. Bruce.
Lived in Concord for 34 years. Was on the finance committee for, I think, 6 years. That's about it.
And you work in HR. That's your business.
I mean,
Is that
I
correct?
do executive search, HR consulting, that sort of thing.
Thank you. And
I'm a
Anne.
CPA by training,
oh, okay.
whatever.
Anne, you made it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've been in Concord since 1973 and lived over near Verrill Farm originally and moved over to Nurse Knack Hill about 30 years ago. And then I've been on the finance committee, the balanced transportation committee. I was chair of the school board for 6 years. I have been the league president and I've owned my own business. And it's been in the HR arena. It's around leadership.
It's an august group. Thank you all. We've had two of you have expressed interest in the clerk position. So if you like, we can.
I defer.
Now, my kids have told me this.
Yeah, right. Well, Ruth, it was two and not including, I didn't, you weren't one of the two I was thinking of,
Yes.
so.
Thank you.
So Anne had volunteered also. So
I
if
didn't.
you are willing to do, no, she's shaking her head no. Claude, it's back to you.
Okay.
Would I just need a nominate, oh, I'm sorry, I gotta really back up. I've got to do a roll call vote to open this meeting. Ruth Lauer,
Here,
Claude Chicchetti,
Here.
Ann Rarick,
Here,
Paul McCone,
Yep.
Bruce Button.
Here,
Okay, so I would entertain a notion to nominate Claude for clerk.
so move.
Second,
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 I'll do another roll call vote. Ruth,
Yes,
Claude,
Yes.
Anne,
I,
Paul,
yes.
and Bruce.
yes.
All right, that was the easy one. Now it comes time for us to for you to choose a chair. It occurred to me, I'm not sure if this is appropriate for coach. There could be co-chairs. The only issue, and maybe it's not an issue with that, because of open meeting law, if we're co-chairs, you can speak to each other, but you can't speak to any of the rest of us, because once you get to 3 people talking, it's a deliberative session and it's not allowed under open meeting law. So, however, there are committees that have co-chairs, so we'd certainly entertain that. Don't all jump in at once. The other thing we can do is wait till later on in the meeting and after we discuss some other things and build your enthusiasm for the position.
That's fine. I would prefer to be, since this is my first committee assignment, or after retiring here, I would prefer to just be in the background and let other more experienced people be in charge.
I'm chair of another big committee and I'd be willing to co-chair this, but I'm not willing to do it all by myself.
Okay. So we have
Could I not-
two.
Could I nominate Ruth Lauer?
Oh,
I so carefully ducked.
yeah.
So we have staff, right? We have a Jeremy who would always be there for us to make sure we get posted and whatnot, right? We have Claude.
So that would come under Claude, I think, as clerk. He would
Yes,
host the meetings, and Jeremy as our Zoom administrator, but depending on what day and time we pick going forward, I think he's a popular guy in that role. So we'll see how that works out. It may be someone else.
Yes, hi, everybody. My name is
Hi.
Jeremy. For those of you who don't know me, I work in the town manager's office. So I think just as a note, although many of you probably know this, so for postings, our office provides the Zoom meeting connection and support, and then all agendas would go to the town clerk's office for posting once you do have the Zoom information ready to go. And that's townclerk@concord.ma.gov.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy.
Mhm.
But you'll always be here for us, right?
We'll see.
we want you to be the favorite.
I appreciate that.
Ruth, I'd be willing to co-chair with you.
I am happy to work with people. That's not my problem. But I don't know if Susan has put too much of a limitation on as far as if we can co-chair, but we can't speak to each other. What are we?
Well, you can, but you can't speak to any of the other members. You can't speak to Paul or Bruce or Claude, but you're free to just, talk to each other.
So any 2 people were good. Okay,
Yeah.
so Ann, why don't we do it?
Yep, we'll do it.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to nominate Ann Rarick and Ruth Lauer as co-chairs of the Personnel Study Task Force?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, roll call vote. Paul,
Yes,
Ruth,
Yes,
Claude,
Yes.
Anne,
Yeah.
and Bruce.
yes.
Okay. So declare. So now, it's your preference here, but if you'd like, I can give some introductory information and talk about how we got here. And then hopefully, my goal in this is for us, not necessarily today, but at the beginning of the process, this meeting and perhaps the next, just to become familiar with the background and to come up with a kind of a roadmap. And one of the things to keep in mind is what the value added is for the personnel board. The personnel board was included in the town charter as one of the committees to be appointed. There isn't a charge per se. There is a document from 1985 that you all received. That's the establishment of personnel department. And then the document that's been guiding us is the personnel bylaw, which was last updated a couple of years ago. I was on the personnel board for 9 years, and one of the issues about personnel board is that there were certain hurdles that are included in the bylaw that mean we have to meet in order to accomplish them. But the other piece is every year for the last 9 years, the consent calendar has included the compensation plan. And it's never been an issue. And one of the considerations is whether that needs to go to town meeting. The other consideration is what is an appropriate role for a personnel board in a town with a strong town manager form of government. And if you look on the personnel board page, there's a whole bunch of documents, and one of them is a demographics on what other towns have personnel boards. The personnel board preceded the establishment of a personnel department, a human resources department. So the tasks that it performed initially were things like job descriptions and pay grades and those sorts of things, which are now done professionally. One of the situation in our modern employment world is that there are a lot of regulations that Amy knows, and unless we have background in municipal HR, we don't. So we depend on the professionals to inform us of those, but it's not the same as in 1950, when volunteers are doing so much more. So we want to try to figure out what's the appropriate role, because there are things perhaps beyond what the board is doing now that would add value to the process of attracting and retaining employees. So that's kind of the big picture. I'm open for comments or questions. And
Has the HR department done anything around best practices?
yes, Amy had an obligatory meeting at 4, so she came in just for a couple minutes before you got here just to say hello. But yeah, she does that. She also checks periodically. There's an assessment by a consultant to assess the job classifications and the pay grades. But especially now in this kind of dynamic hiring phase, things move fast. And we want to give the professionals the flexibility to do what they need to do, but also there's a desire on the part of townspeople to have the personnel board be involved and have some oversight. And looking at the other towns in the Commonwealth, there are not many with the town manager that have still have a personnel board. A lot of them with town manager, I believe, well, this remains to be proven, but that the professional department has kind of superseded the personnel board. So there aren't a whole lot that still operate this way. So we're kind of trying to play catch up to the 21st century in some ways, but not wanting to abandon. But on the other hand, I can tell you that in my time on the personnel board, and Claude could probably chime in on his assessment, is that a lot of what we did was, Amy would present to us, this is the position, we want to change it from this grade to this grade, or this position, we want to hire this person. It used to be if you were hiring above midpoint in the wage schedule, you had to have the permission of the personnel board. We got that taken off our list because obviously if you want to extend an offer, you have to convene personnel board in order to get that particular permission. But I found it a lot of the time we would be presented in whoever was the manager, if it was Chris or if it was Stephen, or if it's a department head, CMLP, or someone that the job was in their category, they would come, they present the material, and generally we would say, oh, that sounds reasonable, and vote for it. So there wasn't a lot of, and none of us had necessarily had particular skills in that area. Claude, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's right. I mean, one of the things that's a little difficult about the position is that it's not a budgetary issue. It's not a finance issue. It's within the purview of the town manager to hire people within that framework. And it's not that we're saying yes or no. We're just saying, does it fit within that framework? So it did always feel a little bit odd because, you kind of question what's your role? How am I adding value? And, we hoped we're adding value from time to time if there was a nuance here or if there was a larger change. But yeah, I mean, what I would be interested in is kind of gets to Ann's point. I would love as a framework, even before we go too far to, have initial discussions, to know what other towns are doing, to know what best practices are, so that, we can at least, take a guidance to where we might want to go. I agree the way the town does it, there are some statutory responsibilities of the personnel board, but that isn't the main aspect of what our day-to-day work was. Those would come up occasionally, and they would actually be quite infrequent relative to the, kind of, I hate to use the word, but kind of rubber stamping, what we were told in terms of the framework.
Yeah, one of the critical things about the personnel board is that it represents a vehicle for non-union employees if there's a grievance or if there's some dispute, that the union employees have the union reps to go to, but the non-union employees don't. However, in the 9 years, I saw 2 of those cases, and I'm wondering, I don't know, this is speculative, that certainly there have been people left, and whether it's, it ends up being lawyer versus lawyer, and we're not in that loop at all, I don't know, or they agree on terms, one of the two, but we don't see, I've only seen 2 in 9 years, so. Yep. But it's something that should be available to the employees.
If I may for just one moment, in trying to get a bit of a background as to what has happened in the past, I went out onto the town site and pulled up some of the documents for in 1985 when the HR department was created, and there are some other documents that follow that. One of the things that struck me on some of these documents was that the first thing that the group did, or the personnel board did, if I'm correct, was they did outreach to the employees.
Do what?
And that struck me as,
He said outreach to employees.
yes,
Yeah.
they met with employees to talk about the role of the personnel board, I believe. And to use, I believe Claude's term, a framework of where they were going. That would seem to me, and I'm not suggesting anything, I'm just throwing it out there with respect to the overall picture, is since we're talking about a board that, you know, the personnel board that represents or could represent some interest to the employees, the HR department in the charge of this task force is to study the personnel bylaw, comment the charge of the personnel board. So I believe there could be, after some discussion, and maybe not, that some vehicle of outreach to the employees should be something we do first, or during our process, so that, you know, with some thoughtful questions and responses. I know you can go down a rabbit hole in looking for people's responses to certain questions, but I have given this some thought, and I'm just floating the balloon that I think it would be a very helpful process to do some outreach. There's the little devil up in my shoulder that talks to me sometimes and says, well, this has been, you know, the outreach to employees has happened before, but it's happened at the town manager's level, where the town manager went and met with different departments. And I know being involved, or being actually on the town book since 1978, I've worked for 3 town managers, 3 different styles, 3 different people with different philosophies, I guess. And I think we need to know what the employees think before we can, as a group, decide what we should do for the employees. And I don't think it would be an unreasonable exercise, because if we're talking about the personnel bylaws, that's not just non-union. The union is covered by the personnel bylaws of the town. So, and there are members of the, you know, people seem, there's a misconception that, you know, the police department or the fire department or a department on the Department of Public Works, Concord Public Works, they are solely union. There are people within those organizations that are non-union. So I'd just like to keep that as a former employee that was here for 30 years, that there's a mix of folks that I think would have some interest and some stock in this. And I'm just floating that. And I would like to just, I'll throw out there that surveys seem to be popular in Concord now. There's surveys for everything. I'm wondering if there is value. I think there would be, personally, but I'm 1 of 5, that some outreach to the employees via a survey and not in an anonymous survey. It would have to be something that is managed by, I think a third party would be helpful. And if we measure things, how do we measure what the employees thoughts are on where the personnel board is, where the grievance process is. Have you used it in the past? Or quite frankly, do you even know that there's a personnel board? I think the answer could be from a lot of employees that the answer is no.
Mhm.
No idea. So that's my little speech that I just throw out there. If our charge is to look at the personnel bylaws, that affects everybody, union and non-union. And I'd be curious to see what, not so much at the upper management level, but that's who the employees make the town.
Mhm.
And a discussion without speaking to them, and that was what was done in '85. So I'm throwing it out there just for thought.
Thank you, Paul. Ruth, actually, can I turn this over to Ruth and Ann now, or would you want me to continue gathering data?
I
Ruth
would-
put her hand up, though.
My hand was up to concur in bits and pieces with Paul. I'm perfectly happy for you to continue leadership on this particular meeting until we can get our feet under us. But I can also turn to Anne and see how she feels about that.
Go ahead,
Uh,
Ruth. I'll take the
I-
next one.
There you go. What I wanted to partially concur with Paul about has to do with employees, and that our earlier conversation seemed to be about a compensation plan or a job description. And, those things happened in a vacuum. And once you were an employee of the town, it was never part of your life again. Well, that's just not the way it is. There are the personnel policies and procedures. There are the issues that affect employees, whether they're union or non-union, throughout our whole career at the town. And many times the town doesn't know. Many times employees don't know. This is an opportunity for everybody to renew our acquaintance with how we get things done. And the town, I think, the town believes strongly that we can do things. We, the town, can do things right. Now, sometimes that's responding to an issue, and sometimes that's introducing an issue. But certainly for a couple of years now, the question has been, what is the relationship of personnel board with personnel? And it's an opportunity for us to know what we're doing by studying it before we start to do it. And part of it, I think, is valuable to listen to Paul's point about a survey, but it's not just employees who need to know what's happening in the town. And if there were other people, other stakeholders, their insight could be very valuable to us. Sorry, thank you.
I think over the course of the work you're going to do, there'll probably be a lot of different people that you might want to talk to, and certainly employees is one group of stakeholders. In the charge, it does say, will consider authority and role of a number of stakeholders, including employees and citizens, managers, HR, town meetings, select board, personnel board, and town manager. So, and I also think the in the charge, it says that the human resources director, personnel board chair, and the town manager and other staff as needed are people that we can or you can request to come to the meetings to provide information. In terms of best practices, there was some work done on how other towns do it, but as I said, it's not a big N of towns with a strong town manager form of government that have a personnel board. However, there is data out there and it hasn't been mined yet, but that's certainly it.
And Susan, who did the collection of the data?
This was done, it was a combination of Amy and Ellen Quackenbush, who was a former chair and member of personnel board. So it's in that personnel board page, and it's there's municipal data that has, and they were also looking at, there are towns and there are towns. There are towns like us that have electric, we have broadband, we have these features that other towns may or may not have. So that's something that can,
Yeah.
you collectively can decide what it is you want to gain from that. But I did have a question for Paul. Back when you said the town manager would meet from time to time with employees, but was there the personnel board a known quantity then, or has it always kind of been a non-entity in terms of employees' awareness?
I'd say it's a non-entity. They didn't last very long, quite frankly. The outreach by it was Chris Whalen, and I've worked for 3 different town managers. I don't remember whether Alan Edmund did it. He might have. And Chris did it a couple of years. They were voluntary, and I'm sure that some information was gained by it that was productive. I do know that there was a great deal of skepticism amongst the employees when they were meeting and just wanted to be honest about what was going on. And I know this sounds like more of a supervisory thing, but I think if you think in terms of the personnel board and grievance procedures and the personnel bylaws, I think employee input could be very valuable. When you have a group meeting where people go, where there's a person that meets at the meeting, I'll just very quickly lay out, and you folks will find that I'm fairly blunt about things, possibly too blunt. If you send the town manager out on a voluntary basis to sit with a bunch of employees, the first thing the employees think of is who's the rat in the room? Who's going to be the informant that's going to pass things along for to their supervisor? Or if you don't send the town manager or a high level supervisor, the thought process is, who's going to say that Paul McComb made this comment or made this opinion? It might be a valuable comment, but it might not be something I would necessarily. I would want it to be an anonymous comment for other people to reflect on. If you follow where I'm going with this.
Yep.
If I could jump in, thanks. I concur with Paul and Ruth about the value in outreach. My only caution would be, I think we would have to be very, very careful not to undermine the town manager or HR, and obviously that's not your intention. And I also would worry that if we did it too soon before we define the problem, we would essentially be asking a very wide question, such as, what do you want the personnel board to be? And, you know, we'll probably get comments like, I want more family leave, or I want this and that. And, you know, I don't know that our expectation is, you know, that we should replace what HR is doing and replace what the town manager is doing. So I think when we do outreach, which I think there seems to be broad support, it should be to ask very specific questions that will get us, you know, some information about decisions that we would need to make. You know, again, going back to Ann's point, and I'll echo that because I think it's really the most important starting point. We kind of have to define the parameters of where we could possibly go before we can even ask any questions about how to get there or what it should be. So I would love to get any data that's out there that Amy or Ellen Quackenbush have, and if they can, you know, come and meet with us to give us context, you know, not just give us data, but, you know, say, okay, well, this town does it this way, but they don't do this because of this. And they could, you know, we could really get as full an understanding as they can give us. We could then start to think about decisions that we would need to make and what inputs we would have, which would certainly make sense. I agree to include, you know, lots of stakeholders, employees, citizens, and so on. But I think we're pretty far away from doing any kind of outreach.
Are you folks, have you seen, and I don't know when it was created, it was a woman's, I believe her last name was Quackenbush, if that rings a bell, maybe Ann.
Ellen, that's the name of the
Ellen.
subscription.
Yeah,
Yep.
there's I got all of these documents were on the town site. There was she did really an incredible amount of outreach.
Yeah.
Listing off which towns had personnel boards, which towns didn't.
Yeah. Yep.
Options to consider. That's a, I don't know if everyone has seen that, but it's a,
Nope.
it's pretty
And
comprehensive.
it's, you know, it lists the towns, but in terms of finding out, I don't think the committee got to the point where they were finding out actually how those personnel boards functioned and what they're getting in the nitty gritty, the details from those particular towns. So that's something that hasn't been done yet, but it's, you know, there are levels and levels. There's a website search, and then there's a contacting the people in the different towns to, you know, developing a survey, for instance, to find out what practices are in other areas. Ruth, is that?
I don't want to just put the cat amongst the pigeons too quickly here, but once we start talking about outreach and surveys and best practices, my first thoughts become, what's our budget? Because if we're going to, say, have a survey, we want to do it right. We don't necessarily want to just submit every question that we think of when we might be overlooking other information that really needs to be included. And whether this is something, the whole business of, do we have a budget, whether that's something we need to think about throughout our process. For instance, will we have a meeting at the end of this study to make a report to the town, or are we making the report to the Board of Selectmen or town manager? And, you know, it's structural for me.
The report will be to the recommendations to the select board. As far as we do not have a budget. I can talk to the town manager and see if there are any funds, or to Amy. And I know money is tight, but we're also in the part of the year where we're formulating budgets for next year. So we could ask to kind of earmark some funds, and then you know, I don't know. I can't promise that there's anything there for this year, because I just don't know. But I think I could ask Amy to put something in for next year to address these needs that the committee.
Now, I don't
Yeah.
intend to overlook the skill set of the people on this committee who do have HR backgrounds and they know how to do these kinds of things, but I don't want to find ourselves in a hole.
Yeah.
I think it would be wonderful, since our charge was through town meeting, if I understand it, and there was not a budget there. I think we should work on the assumption that we don't have it. I think, a number of us have done many, many surveys, and we can do our best efforts to vet it through Amy, through the town manager, through the select board, if we want outside opinions. And I think through the current personnel board, to try to make sure that it looks fair. And I think we could probably do a pretty good job, without a budget.
Well,
Excellent.
I will say that the current personnel board has two professional HR people on it. So
Okay.
Bill Marachek and Jim Richardson are both do HR for a living. So, and now we have Bruce here too, who's our resident HR professional. He's not saying anything though.
I'm sitting here reading. Question. How many employees in the town roughly?
That's a Ruth question.
How many
know?
town employees would you guess in
I think
Rockville?
we're closing in on 400 to 500.
For
Okay.
non-union,
We're not counting schools though.
I was gonna
Right.
say, you're
Right.
not counting the schools.
no,
Right.
Yeah.
I should know that, but I don't.
That's fine. That's close. And there's something here that says receive from, how many open positions do we have? I wonder that we're looking for people for.
There's, I don't know. I don't know
That's
that number.
okay.
That's an Amy question, but I know that this is a kind of a crazy hiring time we've all seen this. And she particularly said, there's a town in our area that's really up the ante for line workers, and which is a very hard skill set to get because there's not a lot of people going into it. So the pool is not very large, but they're kind of pulling away, enticing some of our employees. So there's all kinds of dynamics.
Because my recollection from the finance committee is the town had a goal of paying, I'll make up a number, in the top 80th percentile or something like that. So they were
Yes.
competitive to get people.
Yep.
And if we're losing people, that's got to be something we got to look at, I would think. The other question is, there's something here on F that says, receive from the personnel director a monthly report of all appointments to positions under dun.
That was a suggestion, but it hasn't been enacted yet. So
Oh, okay. It's in the. Okay, so this is the 6/24/85 personnel department thing that
yeah.
is here.
Yeah.
So that
1985, yeah, that document
is ancient. Okay.
is ancient, yeah. But doesn't mean that it should be, there aren't things that should be adhered to.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here reading.
To Bruce's point, and I think I get it, from this 85 document, or from some discussion that was in some of the documents that I have from Alan Quackenbush, which he was doing some work on this, is someone made a comment about the turnover of the employees.
Yep.
And I believe that would be just as relevant today as it was back in the, I don't know when it was done, but one of the first things that jumped out at me is in terms of best practices and what are we doing to, hire the best and keep the best.
Yeah, retain.
If that, what is that's going to be my first question that I would like to have answered by the personnel department, HR, is whatever folks think is a reasonable amount of time. Let's take the last 10 years, 5 years, whatever. I agree that right now is a real odd time with respect to hiring, But let's look at over a span of years, not including new positions that were added so that it isn't skewed, because I know the town has added a lot of positions. There needs to be, I think, some consensus whether we're keeping employees or they're moving on somewhere else, and the why. I think would be an important part.
Yeah, I agree. And I know that I recently had a conversation with Amy about that, and she was talking about how they're trying to work on other incentives. They're, that are flexible. The budget is fixed, for salary and wage. So, but there's vacation time. There are other possible enhancements that can be done. So that's been talked about for the last several years, about, especially by Ellen, as the recruiting and retention of quality employees. So, but I don't know. And that could be a place where we could provide, or excuse me, the personnel board could provide some assistance.
Right.
And so, we could get that information. That would be valuable to have for the work that you all are going to be doing too.
I'll defer to our HR friends here, Claude and Bruce. Is there some value that would seem to me to be, since incentives and money, I believe there are also attributes that keep employees, and it's not just money. I think Concord is probably in the higher echelon of paying department, of paying.
Right, and I
towns,
think
so.
generally people don't go into public service for the bucks. I mean,
Right. So, with
But
that said, I see some value in knowing what our turnover is for the last 5 years, who's come and gone, and where are we losing people and having to keep backfilling the jobs. And maybe it's something we can't do anything about, and it's just life. That's certainly not my area of expertise.
My understanding is that these times, none of the things that worked in the past are necessarily going to work in the future.
Right.
Yeah,
I think it's possible we could learn something by, do we have a higher turnover than is normally expected at a municipal level?
Right, and I think that's the question. It isn't in absolute terms, it's relative to other towns, because the world has likely changed a lot. In a different generation, you might work for AT&T for 50 years, and people who are coming out of university today might only work for 2 years and they feel like an old timer, so the world's different. So yeah, it sure makes sense to benchmark ourselves against similar towns and see how we're doing. I mean, my anecdotal impression is that Concord has been very good at hiring and retaining. And I look at the people who, I know at the townhouse who've been there for years and years, and, in the police department, in the schools. So, it seems like anecdotally we're doing quite a good job, but again, I haven't seen any data.
I think the data would be interesting.
And that's something probably Amy could provide us.
yes, I think, yeah, you're right. So you might think about who you might want to have come to the next meeting, and possibly give them a heads up on what specifically, like turnover is a very specific item, what data you're looking for, because this is still in the foundation building phase of the work, where you're gathering data. Does that make sense?
It does, except I think we don't want to get too granular too soon. I mean, we don't want to necessarily say how to fix things in Concord. We're first looking at the role of the personnel board. So if we can establish that first, then we could look at, okay, if the role of the personnel board is to do this relative to the HR department and relative to the town manager, in what ways can we add value? And, sure, it could definitely be turnover could be one of them. But again, I think that's down the road. We first have to say, is that relevant to the personnel board or not? Is that something we should be looking at? And I don't think we've established that yet. So I agree that it makes sense to have people at the next meeting. I'd actually love somebody, if I've not seen the what Amy's put together, Ellen Quackenbush have put together, I'd love to take a look at those. And maybe we'll I'll put are those on the personnel board website or the town
Yes.
website? Okay.
Well, personnel board committee page on the town website.
Okay, so I think we should all look at those and maybe formulate, how would this be for a sort of action item for like the next few days? Take a look at those, come up with some questions, and then for the next meeting, send those questions to whoever is able to come. Maybe it's just Amy, or maybe it's Amy and Ellen, because I'd love to then find out some color around what they've written, which from everyone who seems to be reading it or has read it says that it's quite interesting information.
Okay. I'd like to switch just for a minute because we're coming up on an hour, which is great. There's been a lot of discussion. If we could talk about what frequency you think the committee should meet, and is there a particular day and time? I mean, this time seems to be right for people, but I didn't know if you wanted to plug in. I have every other Tuesday, I have a 4 o'clock meeting, but otherwise Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Is that right? No, it's Wednesday I have it. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday I could do 4, but I'm second. You all, the 5 of you decide, and then I'll fit in however it works out.
How did we all respond? I'm sorry, Ann?
I was just gonna say, for me, this time works.
I was just wondering,
everyone's-
Susan, how the poll of our current members went for this week.
This was the preferred time from, or
Let's
not
stick with
necessarily. This was a good time for everyone. For
Let's
this
stick
4,
with it
4.
then.
Okay,
It's not broken, huh?
so moved.
And wait,
I like
so, would you like to meet on, what is this, the 4th? Or do you want to meet in 2 weeks because there's some research? What's your pleasure?
Well, I would certainly like to meet at least 2 or 3 times before the end of the year, and the only way we're going to get that in with all the holiday is to do it every other week.
Okay, does that work for the rest of you?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think the 11th will work for me, but I can probably do it from my phone anyway. Yeah, I'll make it work on the 11th.
Okay, that is also a holiday, so I'm not sure we should, that's Veterans Day.
That's Veterans Day, you're right.
So it's not a town, it is a town holiday. So perhaps for that week, maybe we should go to
Why? Is anybody going to be away?
Well, Jeremy isn't going.
Jeremy's our.
Gotcha.
And if we want Amy or I guess we're not to that point yet.
Right.
But
How
yeah.
about Thursday? How about Thursday, the 18th?
That's fine.
Okay.
Fine with me.
And then
Like I said, if we're going to get 3 or 4 meetings in before the end of the year, this is what we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
How about if we try Tuesday, November 9th? Since we can't do that Thursday.
Susan, Mondays and Tuesdays are pretty rough for you, aren't they?
Well, Mondays are, and Tuesdays I sleep. No. But I could do, the 9th, I could do November 9th. And actually, I had suggested Mondays because it would be a diversion to have. The select board meets at 6:30, so
Oh, so we can do 4 to 6:30 and you can roll right into your next one.
6:25, yeah. I need a couple minutes.
Well,
But I could-
Tuesdays are my tough day. I have back-to-back meetings.
Well,
All the way
how
till
about,
6:30.
Want to do Monday the 8th?
yeah,
All right.
Should we stay with the 4 PM?
Yes.
yes. And then 2 weeks after that, if we move it to the Thursday, the 18th. Well, it's not
Okay.
quite 2 weeks, it's 10 days. Does that sound?
And we
Yep.
can decide if that works at the previous meeting, sure.
Yeah. And that's a
I would-
Thursday.
Yeah, I would like one of my goals to get as many of our meetings on the calendar
Mhm.
as possible. I know that eventually Jeremy will have conflict as well, just setting us up and getting us our share of Zoom time.
Zoom time.
Because, you know, he's gonna end up being 2 or 3 places at once. And it will also help us post our agenda without falling into any town clerk cracks. That,
Right, and that will be done on a meeting by meeting basis, depending on what you want. Oh, you're thinking of just a generic? Sort
Well,
of,
we could, if we're posted at least generically, then we can always move forward.
yeah,
Yeah, I like the idea of posting generically. You know, we're studying something very specific, so I don't know that we need to say details about who's going to be there and the exact topics. I mean, the topic is very specific already, so.
well, I think going up to the meeting, you can amend the agenda up until,
Yes.
and that might be something to consider, especially if you discuss with the human resource director or the chair of the personnel board or someone else, that you might want to give people a little bit of detail in case they're interested in some aspect but not others. And if they're documents that were specific documents
Okay.
that we're going to be using, we should note what they are, like they do in the other committees. There's a packet that includes. So Claude's having second thoughts already.
No. I mean, the agenda it isn't a clerk role, is it? My understanding is the clerk is kind of finding what happens and reports on it. I thought I'm not trying to put it off, but I thought it's the chairs that set the agenda.
Well, the chairs do set the agenda.
Okay. Just want to be clear about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So we had 2 dates so far?
Yes.
8 and 18.
Yep. And then we have Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
and the week after that is December something.
2. Oh, wait, is that right? December 2nd? Thanksgiving's the 25th. So yes, December 2nd.
That works.
And then 2 weeks after that.
Would be the 16th.
Yeah, that might be a little bit too close to the holidays.
Mm.
That actually is exam week for me, so I can't do the week of the 16th, the week of the 13th at all.
Okay.
Okay. So we get 3 meetings in before the end of the year.
Yep.
Now, does anybody want to do one the week between Christmas and New Year's? No.
You're such a jokester.
Throw it out.
How about if we tried to do November 29th or 30th? We got one on the 18th, the 29th or 30th, Monday or Tuesday. Because the more we push this out, the least we're going to get done.
Yeah.
Everybody-
29th is a
everybody
Monday,
able to
right?
Do the 29th?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put it on there.
29th of November.
Yep.
Yes, please.
And then what would it be for, would it be the 9th of December?
2.
No,
We
second.
said the second, but that might be too
Well,
close.
Why don't we do 9th of November, 9th of December, and that gets us our 4th one in, 1, 2, 3, 4. That gets.
Oh,
our-
yeah, because the second would be too close to the 29th.
Yeah,
Right,
Yep. Okay. So
and
we'll
that
delete
gets you, Claude, in before your exams begin.
Yep.
Good, okay.
So we got the 8th, the 18th, the 29th, and the 9th.
That's
yes.
correct. I think we got a plan. Thank you.
Well
I-
done.
Yes, that was very efficient. We do have, this is at the choice of the committee. I put public comment on at the end of the meeting, which a lot of committees do, but it's the committee's choice as to whether or not to include it, but it is on there today. So I'm wondering if we're ready to open it up for
Yes,
public comment.
Terrific.
Anyone? Jeremy can tell us if there's hands raised or.
well, we can see it too.
Yeah,
Oh,
there doesn't look like there are any hand raised.
Okay. All right.
Oh, Mark Howell has his hand up.
Mark,
Hi, good evening. And first and foremost, thank you all for choosing to serve on this committee. I think this task force actually is a very important effort to be undertaken. One thing I wanted to correct is town meeting actually took no action to create this task force. This task force was created by the select board. And through an agreement, there was an article on the town meeting warrant in the last 2 years, which proposed substantial revision, really complete replacement of the personnel bylaw. And that replacement was objected to in public hearings on both cases. And I would recommend those recordings are available online if you want those comments. And they've been also, some of those comments were also submitted into the records of the personnel board itself when those of us that felt that that bylaw replacement wasn't necessarily appropriate. So I would encourage you to go ahead and look at that. I appreciate the discussion that you've had already. And I think that it's really important for us as residents. Oh, by the way, I should probably give my name and address, Mark Howell, 668 Unders Neck Hill Road. Sorry about that. But what we do as citizens communicates an awful lot to the employees of the town about the place that they work and what they're working for. And having served as an employee of the town and having been a citizen of Concord for more than 20 years, I think that relationship between employees and citizens is a really important one for us to nurture. And I think it actually falls to the personnel board to do that. And I apologize for my dogs. Mommy is almost home and they're very excited about it. So I'll end my comments there.
I just want to say I stand corrected. Mark's correct. There was an article on the town that was up for town meeting, and there was a citizens committee that was proposing an alternative, and they came to the select board a couple days before town meeting and said if the select board agreed to form the committee, they wouldn't move the article at town meeting. So on a 3-2 vote, that's what happened. But what Mark's right, it wasn't a town meeting vote, it was a select board vote. Anybody else? So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
roll call. Paul,
Yes.
Ruth,
yes?
Claude,
Yes.
Bruce,
yes.
Anne.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
forward to
Thank you.
observing
Thanks.
you all.
And to Ann and Ruth, I'll send you a draft of the minutes in the next couple of days. And then you let me know if I need to do anything else after that.
We'll
Sounds
take
great.
care.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.